The late afternoon sun hung heavy over Atlanta, pressing its heat down on the busy streets like an unrelenting weight. Marcus Ellington's black Mercedes glided smoothly through the traffic, its tinted windows shielding him from the world outside. He adjusted his cufflinks absent-mindedly, his mind wandering to the quiet of his home, where his wife, Vanessa, waited. She had been frail lately, her illness demanding more strength than she could give, and Marcus carried the worry silently, buried beneath layers of business meetings, property deals, and corporate dinners. But on that particular day, his attention was pulled away from the polished world of his success. At the corner of Ashby and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, he saw something that unsettled him. A boy, skinny, no older than 12, was trudging along the cracked sidewalk, balancing two large buckets filled with water. His t-shirt clung to his chest with sweat, and his small frame shook under the weight. Each step looked like a battle. Cars rushed past him, indifferent, but Marcus couldn't look away. He slowed the car, watching as the boy paused, setting one bucket down, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. There was a quiet desperation in the way the child kept moving, no matter how heavy the load. Marcus felt a strange pull in his chest, a mix of recognition and unease. Something about the scene pierced the armor he had built over years of success. Before we dive deeper into this powerful story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales that remind us of the strength found in unlikely places. The boy shifted his grip and pressed forward. Marcus tapped the wheel, debating with himself. He could keep driving, disappear back into the cool comfort of his home, and let the moment slip away. Or he could stop, ask questions, disrupt the clean rhythm of his carefully controlled life. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, he pulled his car to the curb. Rolling the window down, Marcus called out, "Hey, son, you all right? That looks heavy." The boy froze, startled, his eyes wide. He seemed torn between answering and running. Finally, he shrugged, adjusting the handle of the bucket. "I'm fine, sir." His voice was soft but carried the edge of exhaustion. Marcus leaned closer, studying him. His face was young but hardened in ways a child's face shouldn't be. "Where are you carrying all that water to?" The boy hesitated, then glanced down the street. "Home, my grandma needs it." Marcus blinked, taken aback. Something stirred in him, a memory of his own youth. He had grown up not far from neighborhoods like this, where broken sidewalks and peeling paint told stories of families trying to survive against odds stacked high. His success had taken him away, but he hadn't forgotten the feeling of carrying burdens too heavy for a child. The boy gave a slight nod and started walking again, as if the conversation were over. Marcus watched him go, the sweat soaking through the boy's back, his small shoulders bent under the weight of survival. Inside, Marcus felt a quiet storm begin to form. He thought of Vanessa at home, her frail body resting in the bedroom they once filled with laughter. He thought of the long hours he had poured into building an empire, the wealth he commanded, and how strangely hollow it all felt when confronted with a boy dragging buckets of water down the street. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, torn between the pull of his world and the call of something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. As the boy disappeared around the corner, Marcus exhaled slowly. He knew in that moment that this encounter was no accident. Something inside him whispered that his life was about to shift in ways he could not yet understand. And so, without knowing why, Marcus turned the car back into traffic, his mind lingering on the boy and the weight he carried, both in his hands and in his life. Darius Johnson's morning started earlier than most children his age. At 12 years old, he should have been rushing to school with a backpack full of books and a mind full of curiosity. Instead, before the sun even rose above the rooftops of his neighborhood, he was already preparing for the long walk to the nearest water source. The pipes in his grandmother's house had stopped working months ago, and no one in the city seemed willing to fix them. Each day, Darius shouldered the responsibility, carrying heavy buckets that left his arms trembling and his back aching. His grandmother, Evelyn Johnson, was the only family he had left. Once strong and full of energy, she now struggled to stand without leaning on her cane. Her health was fragile, her breath sometimes shallow, yet her spirit remained unbroken. She encouraged Darius to go to school, to think beyond the limits of their situation. But Darius couldn't ignore reality. Water was necessary, and without it, his grandmother's condition would only worsen. That morning, the air was humid, the kind of sticky Georgia heat that clung to skin and made each step heavier than the last. The streets told their own story. Cracked sidewalks, faded murals that once celebrated black leaders now chipped and weathered, small shops fighting to stay open despite rising costs. Still, this community carried a rhythm. Neighbors waved at one another, church bells rang in the distance, and children played basketball on bent rims, their laughter echoing against brick walls. Darius longed to be one of those kids, free from worry, but life had carved a different path for him. "Darius," Grandma Evelyn had said that morning, her voice raspy but firm, "don't forget to rest your back. Carrying those buckets every day will wear you down too fast." "I'll be all right, Grandma," he had answered, forcing a smile. "We need the water more than I need rest." Evelyn had sighed, her eyes glistening with both pride and sorrow. She knew the boy was too young for such burdens, yet she also knew she had no one else to rely on. By the time Darius reached the spigot at the edge of a churchyard, sweat had already soaked through his shirt. He filled the buckets carefully, waiting until they were brimming, then crouched low to grip them. His arms trembled under the weight, but he steadied himself. This was his routine, a battle he had to win each day. As he started the long walk back, he felt every stare. Some drivers glanced his way, frowning, but few stopped. In this city, everyone had struggles, and sometimes the sight of another's pain was too much to bear. Darius lowered his head and kept moving, step by step, bucket by bucket. What he didn't know was that on that particular day, his path had crossed with someone who noticed, someone who couldn't simply look away. Back home, Evelyn waited by the window, her Bible resting open on her lap. She whispered prayers for her grandson's safety with every tick of the clock. She had raised Darius since he was a baby, after losing her daughter, his mother, to illness, and his father to circumstances too painful to speak of. Despite her frailty, she poured all the love she had left into the boy. He was her reason to endure, her proof that even in hardship family could keep you standing. As Darius trudged on, his hands aching from the sharp edges of the bucket handles, he wondered how long he could keep this up. His body was young, but his responsibilities were already old. Each day was a test of willpower. He dreamed secretly of a life where he didn't have to carry water for survival, where he could carry a basketball, a pencil, or even just a backpack to school without worry. The sound of tires slowing beside him pulled him from his thoughts. He glanced up, uncertain, as a sleek car rolled closer, its window lowering. A man's voice called out, steady and concerned, breaking through the rhythm of his daily struggle. And just like that, the world Darius thought he knew began to shift. The hum of traffic filled the silence after the man's voice reached Darius. He slowed his steps, balancing the heavy buckets as he turned toward the car. A tall, broad-shouldered man leaned forward from the driver's seat, his sharp suit at odds with the rough edges of the street around them. Darius shifted uncomfortably, unsure if he should answer. "You out here by yourself?" the man asked again, his tone calm but pressing. Darius nodded, gripping the buckets tighter. "'Tain't nobody else to do it," he said softly, his words nearly drowned out by the passing cars. The man studied him, his brow furrowing. "How old are you?" 12, Darius replied, lifting his chin as if daring the stranger to doubt him. The man let out a quiet sigh. "And you're carrying all that every day?" Darius hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "Somebody's got to." "My grandma can't." There was no self-pity in his voice, only a matter-of-fact strength that felt older than his years. It struck Marcus Ellington like a blow to the chest. He remembered a younger version of himself, walking home through streets just like this one, his stomach empty, his clothes patched by a mother who stretched every dollar she earned. He had promised himself he'd never go back, that he would climb out of the struggle and build a life where he'd never have to bend under weight he wasn't meant to carry. But here, in front of him, was a boy forced to carry more than any child should. "You said your grandma needs the water?" Marcus asked, his voice gentler now. "Yes, sir." Darius's eyes flickered toward the road ahead. "She's sick. Can't walk too far no more, so I do it." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He thought of Vanessa lying in their bedroom with the curtains drawn, her face pale and her body thin from weeks of illness. He thought of the way her hand trembled when she tried to hold his, the way her smile still appeared even through pain. The boy's words opened a wound Marcus kept carefully hidden, the fear of losing the person he loved most. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "That's a heavy load for one boy." Darius shifted again, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "I'm strong enough." The quiet pride in the boy's voice made Marcus's heart ache. He recognized that tone. It was the same tone he had used when he told his mother he didn't need help with bills, even though he was barely 17 and working 2 jobs. Strength had been his armor then, just as it was this boy's now. For a long stretch, Marcus sat in silence, his hands resting on the steering wheel while his mind swirled. He wanted to say something that would make it easier, something to lighten the burden pressing down on the boy's shoulders, but no words seemed enough. Darius adjusted his grip and began to walk again. The sight of his small frame leaning into the weight stirred something deep within Marcus. He could have driven off, left the boy to finish his journey alone, but the image lingered too strongly. This wasn't just chance. It felt like a mirror held up to his own past and his present all at once. As the Mercedes rolled slowly behind him, Marcus found himself caught between 2 worlds. The polished halls of his business empire, where power and money dictated his every move, and the raw streets of his youth where survival taught lessons that never faded. In the boy's struggle, Marcus saw his own story written all over again, and he knew he couldn't ignore it. Marcus couldn't shake the weight pressing against his chest as he watched the boy struggle forward with the buckets. His hands tightened on the wheel before he finally made a decision. He eased the car alongside Darius again, rolling the window all the way down. "Son," Marcus called, his tone steady but firm, "let me give you a ride. Those buckets look like they're about to pull your arms right out your shoulders." Darius stopped, his face tightening with suspicion. He glanced at the shiny car, then back at Marcus, unsure. "I don't take rides from strangers," he said carefully. Marcus nodded, respecting the caution. "That's smart. Your grandma teach you that?" "Yes, sir," Darius replied, lifting his chin slightly, the buckets swaying at his sides. "Well," Marcus continued, softening his voice, "your grandma's a wise woman. Name's Marcus Ellington. I live just a few blocks over in Vine City. I'm not trying to scare you. Just don't like seeing a young man wearing himself out this way." Darius shifted his weight, torn between exhaustion and mistrust. His arms ached so badly, he felt like dropping the buckets right there on the pavement, but pride wouldn't let him. He glanced toward the road ahead, the long stretch still waiting for him. "Where you live?" Marcus asked. "Over on Gordon Street," Darius said cautiously. Marcus's eyebrows lifted. "That's a good walk from here. You'll be hurting by the time you make it back. Look, you can keep the door open, sit with the buckets in your lap if you want. I just want to help." The boy's lips pressed into a tight line, but his legs trembled beneath him. Finally, with a quiet sigh, he nodded. "All right, but only this once." Marcus pulled the car over fully, stepping out to take one of the buckets. The boy tried to protest. "I got it," Darius said, his voice sharp with determination. Marcus smiled gently. "I know you do, but even the strongest need a hand sometimes." For a moment, Darius froze, the words hitting him deeper than he expected. No one had said that to him before. Slowly, he let Marcus lift one bucket while he carried the other. They placed them carefully in the back seat before climbing in. The air inside the Mercedes was cool, a relief from the sticky heat outside. Darius sat stiffly, clutching his knees, his eyes darting around the spotless interior. Marcus glanced at him briefly, then back to the road. "You in school?" Marcus asked. "Yes, sir," Darius answered, his voice quieter now. "When I can get there on time." Marcus frowned. "And when you can't?" "Sometimes I'm late because of the water. Teachers get mad, but I can't leave Grandma without it." The honesty in his tone struck Marcus harder than he expected. Silence stretched for a moment as the car rolled past old storefronts and corner markets. Marcus remembered being late to school himself, his teachers looking at him like he was lazy, when the truth was he'd been working before class. "You ever talk to anyone about it?" Marcus asked softly. Darius shook his head. Ain't nobody to talk to. Folks got their own problems. Marcus exhaled slowly, recognizing the truth in those words. When they pulled up to the small house on Gordon Street, Marcus saw it right away. Peeling paint, a sagging porch, and curtains that looked older than the boy himself. Yet the yard was swept clean, the flower pots by the steps holding wilted but carefully tended plants. There was pride here, even in struggle. Darius reached for the buckets quickly, as if embarrassed to let Marcus see too much. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Ellington," he said, his voice polite but distant. Marcus watched him for a moment, something stirring deep inside. This boy carried more than water. He carried a story, one Marcus felt pulled to understand. And though he didn't know why, Marcus wasn't ready to walk away. The next morning, Marcus sat in his office downtown, the skyline of Atlanta stretching beyond the wide glass windows. The polished surface of his mahogany desk reflected the neat stacks of contracts and reports waiting for his attention. Normally, the routine of reviewing numbers and signing deals gave him a sense of control, but today his thoughts wandered back to Gordon Street. He couldn't shake the image of Darius carrying those buckets, or the sight of Evelyn's fragile frame waiting at the door. "Marcus," a voice interrupted, smooth but edged with impatience. Calvin Rivers, his longtime business partner, stepped inside. Calvin was dressed sharply, his tailored suit as sharp as his words often were. He dropped a folder on the desk. "We need to finalize the East Side project this week. Investors are growing restless." Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I know. I'll get to it." Calvin narrowed his eyes. "You seem distracted. What's going on?" Marcus hesitated, debating how much to share. Finally, he said, "Yesterday I met a boy, young, 12. Carrying water for his sick grandmother because their house doesn't have working pipes. He was struggling out there alone, Calvin." Calvin blinked, then chuckled without humor. "Marcus, this city is full of kids struggling. You can't save every one of them. That's just reality." The dismissive tone hit Marcus wrong. "I'm not saying I can save everyone." "But this kid, something about him stuck with me." Calvin waved a hand as if brushing the thought away. "Look, I grew up in those same neighborhoods. You did too, but we worked hard to get out. That's the whole point of building what we built, to not get dragged back into the mess. You start letting yourself get too involved, you'll lose focus." Marcus sat forward, his voice firmer now. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've been so focused on climbing higher that we've forgotten the people still stuck at the bottom." Calvin's jaw tightened. "And what do you suggest? That we throw away years of building for some charity project? Investors don't care about sob stories, they care about returns." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus looked at the contracts on his desk, numbers running across the pages like chains binding him to a world that suddenly felt shallow. He thought of Vanessa, her gentle voice urging him to find meaning beyond profit. He thought of Darius, shoulders bent but spirit unbroken. "I'm not saying abandon the business," Marcus said slowly, "but maybe there's more we could be doing." "More I could be doing." Calvin leaned across the desk, his expression cold. "Careful, Marcus. You start down that road, you'll find yourself with a lot less influence. The people who trust us with their money don't want distractions. They want results." Marcus met his gaze, a quiet fire building in his chest. For years he and Calvin had walked the same path, driven by ambition and a hunger to prove themselves in a world that often overlooked men like them. But now Marcus felt the weight of a different kind of responsibility pressing on him, one he could no longer ignore. The office felt stifling, the glass windows more like barriers than opportunities. Marcus turned his chair toward the city, his eyes tracing the rooftops of neighborhoods like the one he grew up in. He knew Calvin was right in a practical sense. Profit and power demanded focus. But for the first time, Marcus questioned whether that was the kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. Calvin straightened his tie, frustration etched into his features. "Think about it, Marcus. Don't let one boy make you forget who you are." Marcus didn't answer right away. He stared at the city below, his thoughts divided between the polished towers of downtown and the cracked sidewalks of Gordon Street. And deep down, he knew he was standing at a crossroads. one that would test everything he thought he knew about success and responsibility. That night, after a long day of business meetings and internal debates, Marcus came home to the quiet warmth of his house. The city lights from outside cast a faint glow against the large windows, and the faint scent of lavender, Vanessa's favorite, lingered in the air. But it wasn't just the scent that made the house feel empty. It was the silence. Vanessa had been battling an illness for months, and as the days passed, her strength had waned. She no longer greeted him with the same energy, and there were times when the woman he loved seemed to slip away a little more with each passing day. Marcus found her in their bedroom, the same place he'd left her earlier that morning. She was propped up with pillows, a blanket tucked around her frail body. Her dark skin, once radiant and full of life, now appeared pale, and her hair, usually so neatly combed, lay in soft curls around her face. But her eyes, those eyes, full of wisdom and warmth, still held the spark that had drawn him to her years ago. "Hey, baby," he said softly, sitting beside her. "How are you feeling?" Vanessa smiled, her hand reaching out to touch his. "I'm fine, Marcus, just a little tired." Her voice was weaker than usual, but it still carried that familiar tone of strength. Marcus sat down beside her, his heart heavy with the weight of the day's decisions. The image of Darius carrying those buckets of water kept returning to him, gnawing at him in the quiet moments. Vanessa noticed the distant look in his eyes. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently, squeezing his hand. Marcus hesitated, unsure how to put his thoughts into words. "I met a boy today, a 12-year-old named Darius. He's carrying water every day for his sick grandmother. His family's struggling. No clean water in their home." Vanessa's eyes softened with understanding. "That's awful," she whispered, her gaze drifting to the window. "But it's not uncommon. So many children in this city face challenges like that." "I know," Marcus replied, rubbing his temples. "But something about it, I can't shake it. I keep thinking about how much we've built, all this wealth, all this success, and it feels like I've been running away from the kind of people I used to be. The people who are still struggling." Vanessa's fingers gently brushed his hand. "Marcus, you've worked hard. You've built something that most people can only dream of. But you also know that you can't save everyone. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." He looked at her, his expression conflicted. "But maybe that's the problem, Vanessa. I've been so focused on success, on business, that I've forgotten where I came from. I've forgotten the people who still need help." She smiled, a faint, tired smile that spoke of years of understanding. "You're doing the best you can, and you've always wanted to make a difference, but change doesn't always happen overnight. You can't fix everything, Marcus. But you can make a difference one person at a time." Her words were simple, but they struck a chord deep within him. She had always been his anchor, his reminder of what truly mattered. She had seen the good in him when others only saw ambition. She had always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. "You're right," he murmured, squeezing her hand. "I've been so focused on the big picture that I've forgotten to look at the people right in front of me." Vanessa's voice grew softer, her eyes drifting closed, as if the weight of her words had drained her. "Don't lose yourself in the process, Marcus. You've already made a difference in so many lives. Just don't forget who you are." For a long moment Marcus sat there in the quiet, the weight of her words sinking deep into his soul. She was right. He couldn't save the world, but he could start by doing what he could, helping those who were close, those who needed it most. As the night stretched on, he remained at her side, lost in thought. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward Darius and others like him. He would find a way to make a difference. For Vanessa, for the community, for the boy who carried water with the quiet strength of someone far older than his years. And with that thought, he found a renewed sense of purpose in his heart. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and business transactions. But in between the endless flow of work, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Darius and his grandmother. It wasn't just the image of the boy carrying those heavy buckets of water. It was the realization that so many children in their city carried burdens like that every single day. He'd come so far, but now, as he looked at the world around him, The success he had worked so hard for felt hollow. Marcus knew he couldn't ignore what he had seen, what he had heard. It had shaken him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He made some calls, researched local organizations, and found a few people who could help with Darius's situation. But the more he learned, the more he realized how deep the issues went. How many families were struggling with the same problem of water access. How many people were being left behind by the system. It was overwhelming. One evening, Marcus sat in his home office, papers scattered across the desk trying to focus on his work. But his mind kept drifting back to Darius, to the weight the boy carried, literally and figuratively. His phone buzzed, and Marcus glanced at it, seeing a message from one of his contacts at the city's water department. "We've looked into the situation. The pipes are outdated, and it will take months, if not longer, to fix the issue in that area. The city can't prioritize this right now." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Months. That was far too long for Darius and his grandmother to wait, and the thought of them continuing to suffer in silence while the bureaucracy dragged its feet angered him. Before he could respond, the phone rang. It was Calvin. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." Calvin's voice was curt, not his usual casual tone. "We've got some serious issues with the East Side project. The investors are backing out and they're looking for answers." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. This was the last thing he wanted to deal with right now. "I'm on it, Calvin. But listen, I've been looking into something." "Not now, Marcus," Calvin interrupted. "We need to focus on this. We can't afford any distractions. This project is too big for us to lose." Marcus closed his eyes, frustration rising in his chest. "I'm not abandoning the project, Calvin, but something's wrong here. I can't just turn a blind eye to what's happening in our own city." Calvin let out a heavy sigh. "I get it. You're trying to play the good guy, but that's not how business works. If we want to stay on top, we need to focus on our bottom line. The investors don't care about charity. They care about profit." Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. The clash between his desire to make a real impact and his responsibilities as a businessman had never been clearer. He couldn't just walk away from his work. It had been years in the making, but the realization that his success was rooted in a system that overlooked people like Darius, people like Evelyn, made him question everything. "I'll handle it," Marcus said finally, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm not letting this go. I'm going to do something about it." After the call ended, Marcus sat in the quiet of his office, the weight of his decisions pressing heavily on his shoulders. He knew he was standing at a crossroads. The choices he made now would shape not just his future, but the future of those who had been left behind for far too long. His mind kept returning to Darius, to the quiet strength the boy had shown in the face of hardship. He had to do something. He couldn't just let the system continue to fail people like him. That night, Marcus made a decision. He would confront the system head-on, even if it meant risking everything he had worked for. There were people in his city who were in need, and he wasn't going to turn his back on them. As he sat there, his phone buzzing with more messages about the East Side project, Marcus realized that the hardest challenges didn't come from the boardrooms or the deals he closed. They came from the heart, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them. The following week, Marcus returned to Gordon Street. The boy Darius had been on his mind constantly, and Marcus found himself inexplicably drawn back to him. He had promised himself he would help, but the deeper he looked, the more he realized how vast the problem was. There were systems in place that were failing, and people like Darius, who had little power, were caught in the middle of it. This time, when Marcus arrived at the small house, he didn't just drive by. He parked his car and walked up the porch, feeling the weight of his own doubts with every step. The house, though modest, held a warmth, a quiet dignity. Marcus knocked on the door, his heart beating a little faster as he waited for an answer. It was Darius who opened the door, his face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and wariness when he saw who stood on the other side. "Mr. Ellington," Darius said, his voice polite but cautious. "Hey, Darius," Marcus said with a warm smile. "How you doing, man?" "Good, I guess," Darius replied, his posture still stiff as if unsure of what to make of this sudden visit. I've been thinking a lot about you, Marcus continued, and your grandma. I want to help. I know the water situation is bad, but I'm trying to figure out how to make a change, not just for you, but for everyone in this neighborhood. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly skeptical. How are you going to do that? The city don't care about people like us. Marcus paused, his expression softening. He could feel the weight of Darius's words that came from years of disappointment. It was hard to argue with that kind of truth. You're right, Marcus admitted. The system isn't fair, but you don't have to fight it alone. I'm not just some businessman who wants to help for a good story. I want to make real change. I want to help you get your education, help your grandma get the care she deserves. Darius looked at him for a long moment, the skepticism in his eyes slowly giving way to something else, curiosity, maybe even a little hope. Why? Darius asked, his voice quiet. Why would you care about people like us? Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze dropping for a moment as he thought about his own upbringing. Because I was once just like you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I grew up in a place where people didn't care. I watched my mom struggle every day. I know what it feels like to be invisible. Darius was silent, his face a mask of concentration as he processed Marcus's words. I know that life's hard, Marcus continued, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself. I want to teach you what I know, about business, about life. You've got so much potential, Darius, I see it. And I want to help you use it, so you can create the future you deserve. For the first time since they'd met, Darius's shoulders relaxed, and he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. All right, Darius said slowly, but I don't know nothing about business or none of that stuff. Marcus smiled, the weight in his chest lightening just a little. That's okay. You don't need to know anything right now. What matters is that you're willing to learn. You've already got the strength and determination. That's more than most people have. Over the next few weeks, Marcus took Darius under his wing. They met regularly, sometimes at the house, sometimes at Marcus's office, where he would show Darius the ropes, how businesses worked, how money flowed, how to read contracts, and, most importantly, how to think strategically. Darius had a sharp mind, though he never thought of himself as anything special. At first, the lessons were simple: how to manage money, how to set goals, how to solve problems. But slowly, Marcus began to see more than just a kid from the streets in front of him. He saw a young man with a fire inside, someone who was hungry for knowledge and determined to break the cycle that had held his family down for so long. One afternoon, as they sat in Marcus's office, going over the numbers for a small community project Marcus was planning, Darius looked up and asked, "Do you really think people like me can do this? Can I really make something of myself?" Marcus didn't hesitate. Absolutely. You've got more than what you think. You've already started. Just keep moving forward. Don't ever stop believing in yourself. The words resonated with Darius. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a future worth fighting for. And Marcus, sitting across from him, realized that in helping Darius, he was finding the meaning he had been searching for all along. This wasn't just about charity. It was about changing lives. The weeks after Marcus began mentoring Darius felt like a whirlwind. Every meeting, every lesson brought him closer to a realization he hadn't expected. His life was shifting in ways he couldn't control. There was something so raw, so real about Darius's hunger for change, something that reignited a fire inside Marcus. But it wasn't just about teaching the boy business or financial literacy. It was about showing him that there was a way out of the cycle of poverty and hardship that had seemed endless for both of them. Yet, as his bond with Darius grew stronger, so did the tension in Marcus's professional life. The East Side project, the one he'd been working on for over a year, was now teetering on the brink of collapse. Investors were breathing down his neck, demanding answers and results. The community efforts Marcus had started, the outreach programs to help those like Darius, were now starting to feel like distractions to those who only cared about the bottom line. One morning, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the pile of reports that had accumulated over the past few weeks. He hadn't made as much progress as he wanted on the project, and the pressure from his investors was mounting. Calvin called, his voice impatient as always. "Marcus, we're getting a lot of heat from the investors. They want to know when we'll see returns on this project. You need to move faster." "I'm working on it, Calvin," Marcus replied, his tone measured but tense. "But I've been dealing with some other things. The community efforts, Calvin interrupted, incredulous. "Marcus, we've talked about this. Those people aren't going to make you rich. I don't know what you're doing, but we need results. You can't afford to keep spinning your wheels with charity projects." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm not spinning my wheels, Calvin. I'm trying to make a real difference." "You're trying to be a hero," Calvin shot back, "and that's not going to get us anywhere. You need to make a choice. Either focus on the project and get the returns, or step away and let someone else take the reins." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He'd known it was coming, but hearing Calvin say it so bluntly stung. He looked at the contract in front of him, the one that would secure his financial future, the one that would make him the kind of success everyone respected. The thought of stepping away from it all was terrifying, but as he sat there, the image of Darius carrying those water buckets for his grandmother flashed in his mind. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't about prestige or the deals he'd closed. It was about something deeper, something that had been missing in his life for too long. "I'll handle it, Calvin," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I'll do what needs to be done. But don't forget, this project isn't just about us making money, it's about something bigger. I won't lose sight of that." The line went silent for a moment before Calvin's voice, sharp and dismissive, came through. "Just get it done, Marcus. I'll talk to you soon." Marcus hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the desk in front of him. The pressure of his decisions felt heavier than ever. He knew he couldn't ignore the work he had put into the East Side project. But he also couldn't ignore the impact it was having on his soul, on his sense of purpose. He thought about Darius, about the lessons they had shared. The boy had shown him something Marcus had forgotten, the value of purpose over profit. The boy had been carrying buckets of water not for the money, not for the recognition, but out of love, out of necessity, out of a deep, unshakable connection to his family. And in Darius's struggle, Marcus saw a reflection of his own journey, one that wasn't just about climbing higher, but about lifting others along the way. But with every step Marcus took toward making a difference, he was finding that the sacrifices were becoming harder to bear. The more he tried to reach out to the community, the more the world he had built around business seemed to pull him back in. He was walking a fine line, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep balancing it. The call with Calvin had been a reminder of what was at stake. Success in business could secure his future, but it could also strip him of his soul if he wasn't careful. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus was beginning to see that the path forward wasn't as clear as he had once believed. His phone buzzed again, and Marcus glanced at the screen. It was a message from Darius. "Thanks for teaching me." "So I'm learning a lot." Marcus smiled, the weight on his chest lightening just a little. He had made a difference in one life. But what about the others? He knew he had to make some tough choices ahead, and the next few steps would define the kind of man he would become. The following weeks felt like a shift for Marcus, as if he was moving in a new direction, but the path wasn't clear. His efforts to help Darius and others in the community were slowly gaining momentum, but they were also costing him in ways he hadn't expected. His business meetings became more strained, the pressure to meet deadlines heavier, and his conversations with Calvin more frequent, each one reminding him of the fine line he was walking between his personal mission and his professional obligations. One evening, as Marcus sat in his home office staring at his phone, a message from Darius popped up. It was short but filled with meaning. "Mr. Ellington, I made it to the scholarship program. I'm going to start next month." Marcus felt a surge of pride, his chest swelling with emotion. He read the message again, a smile spreading across his face. This was it. This was why he had started mentoring Darius in the first place. This was the breakthrough he had been hoping for, not just for Darius, but for the entire community. In that moment, The weight of all the sacrifices, the doubts, and the compromises he had made over the past few weeks seemed to lift. The world outside, the deadlines and the investors, felt distant. What mattered was that Darius had made it. He had broken through the cycle that had trapped his family for so long. Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. He picked up his phone and sent a reply. "You did it, Darius. I'm so proud of you. This is just the start. Keep pushing forward. You've got a bright future ahead." As Marcus sat back in his chair, a sense of peace settled over him. For the first time in a while, he felt like he was on the right path. The pressure from Calvin and the investors was still there, but it no longer felt as suffocating. He realized that true success wasn't just about numbers and profits. It was about moments like this, seeing someone else rise, knowing that he had played a small part in it. Later that week, Marcus met with Calvin again to discuss the East Side project. Calvin's tone was as sharp as ever, the financials still looming over them like a shadow. "Marcus, we can't afford to keep losing time. The investors are breathing down our necks. We need results now, not later." Marcus nodded, though the urgency in Calvin's voice felt distant. "I hear you, Calvin. But I've been thinking. There's more we could be doing, more we should be doing for the community. Maybe it's time we rethink how we approach this project." Calvin raised an eyebrow, clearly frustrated. "Rethink it? Marcus, this is business. We don't have time to rethink things. We need to move quickly or we'll lose everything." Marcus took a deep breath, his patience wearing thin. "I know, Calvin. But there's something more here. This project, this city, it's not just about profit, it's about creating lasting change. I can't keep pushing for numbers without thinking about the people who are affected by them." Calvin's eyes narrowed. "You've been on this community kick for a while now, but what happens when the numbers don't add up? What happens when the investors pull out?" Marcus stood up from his chair, walking to the window that looked out over the city. He had spent years building this empire, but as he looked out at the city, at the neighborhoods like the one Darius lived in, he realized the real work was just beginning. The city was more than a backdrop for his success. It was his responsibility. "The numbers will come," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "But the impact we make, the change we create, that's what will last. I don't want to be remembered for just building buildings or closing deals. I want to be remembered for helping people like Darius have a chance at a better life." Calvin was silent for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. "Fine, but don't expect me to back down if things go south." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of the decision he had just made. "I'm willing to take that risk." As Calvin left, Marcus turned back to the window, the weight of his choices settling on him. He wasn't sure how everything would turn out. The road ahead was uncertain, and there would be many more obstacles to face. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a sense of hope, real hope, not just for himself but for Darius and for the people in his city who had been forgotten for too long. There was work to be done, and he was ready to do it. The weeks following Marcus's decision to shift his focus toward helping the community were met with growing tension. While his efforts with Darius were making a noticeable impact, the challenges within the business world became more pronounced. The East Side project, the one Marcus had once seen as his ticket to a legacy, was now mired in resistance. The investors weren't the only ones pressing him. The local government, too, was slow to move, bogged down by bureaucracy. Every call Marcus made to city officials felt like a dead end. He knew the people on the other side of those calls, but the system was a maze of red tape. They weren't interested in community outreach or the promise of long-term change. They wanted results, and they wanted them fast. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Marcus met with Calvin again at the office. The tension between them was palpable, and it only seemed to grow with each conversation. Calvin was more focused than ever on the business side, pushing Marcus to meet deadlines and reminding him of the investors who were now getting impatient. "We need to get this project moving," Calvin said, sliding a report across the table. "The clock is ticking. The longer we delay, the more pressure we're going to feel from both the investors and the city. We can't afford to keep dragging our feet." Marcus sat back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the desk. He had heard this same argument 100 times, And while he understood the urgency, the tension in his chest told him that something wasn't right. "Calvin," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand what you're saying, but there's more at stake here than just profit. There are real people whose lives depend on this project, and I'm not going to rush this through just to make a deadline." Calvin's face tightened. "You can't keep playing the hero. These people, Darius and his family, they're not going to change the outcome of this project. You need to decide if you're in the business of making money or in the business of saving the world." The words hit Marcus hard. He had known Calvin didn't share his vision, but hearing it laid out so plainly stung. Was it really that simple? Was he either a businessman or a humanitarian? Was it impossible to balance both? Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to save the world, Calvin, but if I can make a difference for one person, one family, then that's worth something." "Don't get sentimental on me, Marcus," Calvin snapped. "You don't get to the top by thinking like that. We're at a tipping point. You either focus on this project or you can walk away and let someone else take over." The words hung in the air, thick with finality. Marcus knew this was a breaking point. He had heard the pressure in Calvin's voice, the desire to move forward at all costs. But he also knew that the world he was building for himself, the one filled with profits and skyscrapers, wasn't the world he wanted to leave behind. "I can't just abandon this," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not walking away from the people who need us." Calvin stood up, shaking his head. "Then you're making a mistake. And you'll regret it." Marcus watched him leave, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He knew the choice was his to make, but it didn't make it any easier. Every step he had taken in building his business, in climbing to this level of success, had come with its own sacrifices. And now the greatest sacrifice of all was on the table. What would he have to give up to stay true to his vision of helping others? As the door closed behind Calvin, Marcus sat in silence, the rain tapping softly against the window. His mind was racing. The pressure was unbearable. The pull between his business ambitions and his desire to make a real impact was at war inside him. It was a war that only he could fight, and he knew that there would be no easy answer. But in that moment, as the rain fell harder outside, Marcus made a silent vow. He wouldn't back down. Not now. Not when he had already come so far. The road ahead would be difficult. The resistance he faced, both inside and outside his business, would only grow stronger. But Marcus was ready for it. He wasn't going to lose sight of what mattered most, of the people who needed him, of Darius's dream of a better future. And with that determination in his heart, he knew he would fight, no matter the cost. The days following the conversation with Calvin weighed heavily on Marcus. Each morning he woke to a relentless buzz of emails, meetings, and the constant pressure of deadlines. The East Side project was moving, but not at the pace Marcus had hoped. Investors were getting restless, and the city's approval process seemed to be dragging on indefinitely. He found himself caught between two worlds, the one he had built with his hard work and ambition, and the one he was now trying to build with his heart. Vanessa's condition had taken a turn for the worse, and each visit to the hospital left Marcus feeling more helpless than before. Her once strong spirit was now visibly fading, her body weakening, though her eyes still held the quiet strength she had always carried. The contrast between her resilience and the uncertainty of his own life only seemed to magnify. One evening, Marcus sat beside Vanessa's bed, holding her frail hand in his. She smiled weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Marcus nodded, trying to hold back the tears. "I've been working, yes, but I'm here with you." "I know," she replied, her gaze soft but knowing. "But you need to remember, Marcus, there's more to life than the business. Don't lose sight of what really matters. You've got the chance to change things for good. Don't waste it." Her words, though filled with love, hit Marcus like a wave. For the past few months, he had been so focused on balancing the demands of his business with his newfound commitment to helping the community that he had lost sight of the most important thing in his life, Vanessa, and the time they had left together. As Marcus sat there, his mind continued to race, too. He had committed so much to the community, mentoring Darius, organizing outreach programs, fighting against the very system that had once held him down. But with the pressure mounting on the business front, he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it all together. The following day he arrived at his office to a call from Calvin, his voice sharp and impatient. "Marcus, I need an answer on the East Side project. The investors are getting fed up. They're ready to pull out if we don't show significant progress. What are you going to do?" Marcus's hand tightened around the phone, the tension rising in his chest. The weight of the decision he had to make felt almost unbearable. "I'm not going to sacrifice my values, Calvin," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "This project is important, but it can't come at the cost of the community. The people here need something real, something that lasts." Calvin sighed, his frustration evident. "I get it, Marcus. But we're running out of time. You either focus on making this a success or you step back. You can't keep trying to do both." The words hit Marcus hard. He knew Calvin was right. The pressure was mounting, and he couldn't keep juggling both worlds forever. But as he stood there looking out of his office window at the city, he saw more than just the gleaming skyscrapers. He saw the neighborhoods where people were still struggling, like Darius and his grandmother. He saw a future he could help build, one where real change happened, one that wouldn't be measured in profits but in lives improved. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I'm not walking away from this, Calvin. Not from the community, not from Darius. You can have the East Side project, but I'm going to stay focused on what matters." The call ended with an abrupt click, leaving Marcus standing in his office, torn between his ambitions and his conscience. He knew that stepping away from the project would risk everything he had worked for, but staying in it, ignoring the people who needed him, would be worse. As he sat back down, the weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical burden. He felt as though he were standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown. The road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges that he couldn't predict. But for the first time he felt certain of one thing: he couldn't keep sacrificing his values for the sake of success. Later that evening he returned to Vanessa's side. She smiled faintly as he entered, her eyes searching his face. "Have you made a decision?" she asked softly. Marcus took her hand in his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "I've made my choice. I'm not giving up on what matters." Vanessa squeezed his hand, her smile full of pride and love. "Then you're on the right path, Marcus." In that moment, as he looked into her eyes, he knew that whatever came next, he had made the right decision. The breaking point was behind him. The real challenge was just beginning. The days that followed Marcus's decision felt like a shift in the air. Though the pressures of the business world continued to pull at him, something within him had changed. The weight he had been carrying for so long felt a little lighter now. He had made his choice, and no matter what came next, he knew he had chosen the path that mattered. It wasn't easy, though. The investors called again, each conversation more urgent than the last. But Marcus stood firm, pushing back on the demands for quick results, reminding them that real change couldn't be rushed. The city officials still dragged their feet, caught in a web of bureaucracy. Each setback felt like a test, one that he wasn't sure he could pass. But every time doubt crept in, he thought of Darius. Darius had come so far. The boy who once carried water for his sick grandmother now stood taller, his determination sharper. He was excelling in his scholarship program, earning praise from his mentors, his grades improving, his sense of purpose growing stronger with each passing day. The boy who had once struggled to see beyond the next step in his life now spoke of dreams, of a future where he could make a real impact just like Marcus. One evening, Marcus met with Darius at a local cafe. It was a quiet spot, tucked away from the noise of the city, a place where they could talk without interruptions. Darius was already sitting at a table, his books spread out in front of him. When Marcus sat down, the boy looked up, a smile lighting up his face. "Mr. Ellington," Darius said, his voice still unsure at times but growing more confident, "I've got some good news. I'm doing better than I thought I would in the program. They're even talking about giving me a chance to intern with some of the bigger firms next semester." Marcus's heart swelled with pride. "That's incredible, Darius. You're really making it happen." Darius shrugged, his grin widening. It's a lot of work, but I don't mind. I finally see what you've been talking about. There's more than just surviving. There's a way to actually thrive. Marcus nodded, his voice thick with emotion. You've always had it in you. I'm just helping you see it. The two sat there for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air between them. Marcus thought about how far they had both come. The young boy who had carried the weight of his family's survival, the boy who had seen no future beyond the struggles of today, was now a young man with hope. Hope that wasn't just his, but that he could pass on to others. Darius's growth had become a mirror of Marcus's own journey. It wasn't just about business anymore. It wasn't just about the deals and the numbers. It was about changing lives, starting with one, and letting that change ripple out into the world. Later that evening, Marcus went home to Vanessa. She had been resting more lately, her energy fading but her spirit still holding strong. When he entered the room, she looked up, a small smile tugging at her lips. You look different, Marcus, she said softly. Like you found something. Marcus sat beside her, taking her hand gently in his. I think I have. It's not just about success or making money. It's about making a difference. Darius, he's changing. He's seeing a future he never thought possible. Vanessa's eyes softened and she squeezed his hand. You've done something good, Marcus. And you're right. That's what matters most. The words hung in the air, as comforting as the warmth of her touch. For so long, Marcus had been torn between two worlds, the world of business and the world of people. But in that moment he realized they didn't have to be separate. They could be intertwined, working together for something greater. Over the next few weeks, the pressure on Marcus began to ease. His continued push for community impact gained traction. People within the city, especially those who had once been overlooked, began to rally behind him. Support poured in from local groups, and even some investors started to shift their focus. They saw the potential of the project, not just in financial terms, but in the lasting effect it could have on the city's future. And then, just as it seemed like things were starting to click into place, Marcus received a letter. It was from the city council, confirming the approval for the East Side project to move forward, with specific provisions to support the community outreach programs he had championed. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start, a significant step forward. As Marcus read the letter, he felt a quiet triumph rising within him. The fight wasn't over, but he had won a battle, one that was more meaningful than any he had ever fought in the boardroom. Later that night, he sent a message to Darius. You did it. Keep believing in yourself. The world is waiting for you. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus believed that the world could be changed, not by the things he built, but by the people he helped to rise. The day Marcus received the approval letter from the city council felt like a turning point. It wasn't just the green light for the East Side project. It was the beginning of something bigger. His efforts to intertwine community-focused initiatives with his business goals were starting to bear fruit. There was still much work to do, but the path ahead was clearer now. The weight of the decisions he had made no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a calling. The first thing Marcus did was reach out to Darius. He knew how much this moment would mean to him, the boy who had carried water, who had struggled with doubts about his future. Darius had come so far, and now this victory would give him the platform to continue growing, to keep fighting for the life he deserved. When Darius picked up the phone, Marcus could hear the excitement in his voice, even before he spoke. Mr. Ellington. You're not going to believe it. They accepted my internship. I'm in. Marcus chuckled, feeling a deep pride welling up in his chest. I knew you could do it, Darius. You've worked hard, and now you've got a chance to make it even bigger. Darius's voice cracked with emotion. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. You did the hard part, Marcus said softly. I just helped you see what was already inside you. There was a pause, and then Darius asked, What now? What happens next with the project? Marcus took a deep breath, his thoughts turning back to the letter. The project moves forward, but more importantly, we're going to make sure it's built on more than just bricks and steel. It's about creating real opportunities for people like you, Darius. people who deserve a chance. The conversation shifted, and Marcus could hear the determination in Darius's voice. I want to be part of that. I want to help too. I'm counting on you, Marcus replied. This is only the beginning. I'll need people who believe in this vision, and you're one of them. Together we can build something that matters. As the call ended, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. His journey had always been about success, but now it was about legacy, the kind of legacy that wasn't measured by wealth, but by the impact he made on the lives of others. The next few days were filled with meetings, both business and community-related, but the tone had shifted. The investors were more engaged now that the city had given its approval, and they were beginning to see the potential of the project, not just in financial terms, but in social terms as well. They understood that true success wasn't just about returns, it was about creating a lasting impact. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Calvin, as expected, was still skeptical. He had always been focused on profits, and while he understood the importance of community outreach, he couldn't see how it would translate into real results. You're walking a fine line, Marcus, Calvin warned, his voice tight with concern. You're trying to build something that's not just about profit. I'm all for helping people, but this is a business. You can't lose sight of that. Marcus took a moment, gathering his thoughts. I haven't lost sight of it, Calvin, but I'm not just building buildings. I'm building a future where we help people rise, not just survive. Calvin's face tightened, but he said nothing more. Marcus knew he wasn't going to win every battle, but he was beginning to see that the real victory wasn't in convincing people like Calvin, it was in seeing Darius and others like him find hope. And then, just as Marcus was beginning to feel the weight of the future in his hands, he got a call from Vanessa. It had been a difficult few days for her, but she had been holding on, her spirit unbroken. Marcus, I've been thinking, she said, her voice calm but knowing. I know how much this means to you, and I see how much you've changed. Marcus sat up straighter, feeling a surge of emotion. I've learned so much from you, Vanessa. You've always known what really matters. She smiled softly. It's not about the buildings, Marcus. It's about the people inside them. What you're doing, it's something that will last long after we're gone. The words settled deep within him. They were the words he needed to hear, the reminder that what he was building wasn't just about making a name for himself. It was about making a difference that would stand the test of time. Later that evening, as Marcus sat quietly, he knew that the legacy he was building was no longer just a dream. It was happening, and it was only just beginning. Marcus stood at the window of his office, gazing out over the city that had been his battleground for so many years. The skyline stretched before him, gleaming buildings, towering and imposing, representing both his success and the challenges he had faced. Yet in his mind, it was no longer just about the architecture or the business deals. It was about the people whose lives were intertwined with the spaces he had helped create. The phone buzzed on his desk, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from Darius. Mr. Ellington, I just wanted to say thanks again for everything. I'm doing well in the program, and I'm actually mentoring some of the younger kids now. I've got dreams of running my own business one day, just like you. Marcus smiled as he read the message. It was the kind of moment he had longed for, the ripple effect of one person's growth starting to spread. Darius was no longer just surviving. He was thriving, taking the lessons Marcus had taught him and passing them on to the next generation. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to sit in the quiet, reflecting on how far he had come, not just as a businessman, but as someone who had rediscovered his purpose. The decision he had made, the sacrifices he had been willing to make were all worth it. He wasn't just changing his life anymore, he was helping to change others' lives too. But there was more to be done. The East Side project was a start, but it was only the beginning of something greater. Marcus knew that the work was never really finished. There would always be more challenges, more people to help, more obstacles to overcome. But now he was no longer running from his roots or his responsibility to those who needed him. He was running towards something, a legacy of real impact. His phone rang again. It was Calvin. Marcus, I just got off the call with the investors, Calvin said, his tone more measured than usual. The project's going forward, the city's on board, and the outreach programs are part of the deal. Looks like you were right after all. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a sense of relief washing over him. The battles he had fought in boardrooms, in meetings, and in his own mind had paid off. The vision he had held for so long was finally becoming a reality. Thanks, Calvin, Marcus said, his voice steady, but this isn't just about the project. It's about the people we serve. If we're not creating opportunities for everyone, then what are we doing? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Calvin spoke, his voice tinged with a mix of respect and realization. I get it now, Marcus. I was too focused on the wrong things. You've shown me that there's more to success than just the bottom line. I'm with you on this. Marcus smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. We're in this together. As he hung up the phone, Marcus took a deep breath and stood up, his thoughts turning to Vanessa. She had been a constant source of strength for him, even when the world seemed determined to pull him in different directions. She had always believed in him, even when he had doubted himself. Later that evening, as he sat by her side, he shared the news. The project's moving forward, Vanessa, and we've got the community outreach programs in place. It's all happening. Her eyes sparkled, a soft smile tugging at her lips. I knew you'd do it, Marcus. You've always been meant for this. Her words meant more to him than he could express. With her support, he had found his true calling, not just as a businessman, but as someone who could make a lasting difference. As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. He wasn't just creating a legacy of wealth. He was creating a legacy of change, one that would ripple through the city and the generations to come. And with that sense of purpose in his heart, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. The work ahead would be hard, the obstacles would continue to rise. But he was ready. He had found his purpose, and he was determined to see it through. The true legacy wasn't in buildings or profits. It was in the lives he touched and the change he had sparked. If Marcus's journey inspired you, remember that every one of us has the power to make a difference. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is where you're willing to go. Make a commitment today to take one step toward change, whether in your own life or in the lives of others. Together we can create a future that's built on purpose and progress.